when you lose someone you love. They say time heals all wounds, but what happens when the person you lost never truly leaves you? When every waking moment is consumed by their memory and the only solace you find is in the place where their body rests. My name is Tom, and I'm a graveyard watchman. My wife Annie passed away 2 years ago. I took the job to be close to her, to watch over her grave, and to feel a sense of peace knowing she was near. But peace is a fleeting thing in a place like this. The graveyard is old, nestled on the outskirts of a small town, surrounded by dense woods. It's the final resting place for generations of townsfolk, and among them, the grave of a wealthy oil tycoon, Elias Blackwood. His grave is infamous, rumored to contain a priceless cursed pendant buried with him. Over the years, it has attracted its fair share of grave robbers and thrill seekers. I had grown accustomed to the quiet nights, the occasional rustle of leaves, and the distant howls of coyotes. The cemetery was my sanctuary, a place where I could still talk to Annie, read her favorite books aloud, and pretend, if only for a moment, that she was still with me. But one night everything changed. It was a warm summer evening in July. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and the hum of cicadas. I was making my rounds, flashlight in hand, when I noticed a flicker of light near Elias Blackwood's grave. My heart sank. Another group of would-be thieves, no doubt. I approached quietly, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. As I drew closer, I could make out 3 figures hunched over the grave, shovels in hand. They were arguing, their voices low and tense. "Just hurry up and dig," one of them hissed. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by a hood. "We shouldn't be doing this," another muttered. He was shorter, bald, and visibly nervous. "Shut up and keep digging." The third one snapped. He was older, with a long gray beard and a voice that sent chills down my spine. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The 3 men froze, turning to face me. The tall one stepped forward, brandishing his shovel. "Mind your business, old man." "This is my business," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Leave now, or I'll call the police." The tall man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "The police? Out here? By the time they get here, we'll be long gone." Before I could react, the older man lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. The other 2 joined in, pinning me down and beating me until I could barely move. Pain shot through my body with every blow, and I felt my consciousness slipping away. As I lay there, struggling to stay awake, I heard the short man say, "Look at this. He's always hanging around that one grave. His wife's, I bet." "No," I whispered, my voice weak. "Leave her alone." But they didn't listen. They dragged me over to Annie's grave, forcing me to watch as they dug up her casket. My heart shattered as they pried it open, revealing her decaying body. They took the necklace I had buried with her, a cherished heirloom, and tossed her aside like garbage. "Please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Stop." The older man smirked, holding up the necklace. "This is what you're so worried about, pathetic." He buried me alive in a shallow grave, the weight of the dirt pressing down on me. Panic surged through me as I struggled to breathe, clawing at the earth with my remaining strength. Somehow I managed to break free, gasping for air as I pulled myself out of the ground. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, and looked around. The graveyard was eerily silent, the only sound my ragged breathing. I stumbled towards Annie's grave, my heart heavy with grief and rage. But when I got there, her body was gone. I fell to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. How could they do this? How could they take her from me? My mind raced, trying to make sense of the horror I just witnessed. Then I heard a noise, a low guttural growl that made my blood run cold. I turned, my flashlight trembling in my hand, and saw them. The dead were rising. Corpses clawed their way out of the ground, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, their decaying bodies creaking with every step. And at the center of it all was Annie. Her once beautiful face was now a ghastly mask of death, her eyes hollow and empty. But she moved with a terrifying grace, her body twisted and broken, yet somehow still whole. I wanted to run to escape the nightmare that was unfolding before me, but I couldn't leave her. The undead were drawn to the grave robbers, who had taken refuge in a nearby tavern. I followed them, my heart pounding in my chest as the undead closed in on their prey. The grave robbers fought back, but it was futile. The dead were relentless, driven by a hunger that could not be sated. I watched in horror as the creatures tore the grave robbers apart, their screams echoing through the night. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The undead turned their attention to me, their eyes filled with an eerie intelligence. Annie stepped forward, her movements slow, deliberate. She held out her hand, and I saw the pendant clutched in her rotting fingers. I took it, my hands shaking. As soon as I did, the undead stopped, their eyes losing their unnatural glow. They collapsed to the ground, lifeless once more. Annie's body crumpled before me, and I fell to my knees, cradling her in my arms. I buried her again, whispering my goodbyes through my tears. The next day, I quit my job as the graveyard watchman. I couldn't bear to be there anymore, surrounded by the memories of that horrific night, but I couldn't leave her either. So now, every year on the anniversary of her death, I return to her grave. I bring flowers, sit by her side, and tell her the story of that night, how her love saved me even in death. If you ever find yourself in a small graveyard, on the edge of the woods, beware. The dead don't rest easily there, and neither does the memory of my beloved Annie. My grandfather, a man of few words and mysterious demeanor, became an unexpected source of fascination during a turbulent summer when my parents' strained relationship sent me to stay with him. It was a time fraught with unspoken tensions before their eventual separation, and amidst this backdrop, my grandfather and I embarked on an extraordinary journey through the back roads of the Ozark Mountains. The purpose of our trip wasn't the typical summer adventure of games and friends. Instead, it involved visiting ancient cemeteries scattered across Arkansas and Missouri. To my young mind, it seemed a morbid pursuit, possibly driven by his own mortality after my grandmother's recent passing. However, as I would later discover, there was far more to his quest than genealogical curiosity. Each cemetery visit followed a ritual. My grandfather would meticulously scan the weathered headstones until he found a specific one. Armed with a small notebook and black rubbing wax, he'd create detailed etchings of the engravings, a process that bored me to tears amidst the sweltering summer days. After countless graveyard stops, we arrived late one evening at the Huckleberry Inn, a quaint roadside motel where the air hung heavy with humidity and the promise of a restless night. The place was a relic of bygone days, with its row of single-story rooms and a parking lot that echoed emptiness under the dim glow of flickering lamps. Inside our room, the worn comforter felt like dead weight, and the lumpy mattress offered little respite. As I flicked through TV channels, settling on an episode of Bonanza, my grandfather's request interrupted my attempt to find solace in familiar distractions. "Did you get the ice?" he asked, a routine question that marked our nightly ritual, regardless of necessity. "Not yet," I replied, already feeling the itch of boredom and the stifling atmosphere of the motel room closing in. The ice, it seemed, held significance beyond mere refreshment. Wherever we stayed, my grandfather insisted on filling a plastic bucket with ice from the motel machines, placing it dutifully on the dresser. It didn't matter if we drank tap water or had just finished a late dinner. A full ice bucket was non-negotiable. Venturing to the ice and vending machines tucked in a dimly lit alcove, I found the Pepsi machine glowing eerily amidst the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. My attempts to coax ice from the stubborn machine proved futile, leaving me to return empty-handed to the room. Grandpa's reaction surprised me. Normally unflappable, he sat up abruptly, concerned etching lines on his face. No ice? Was there another machine? His calm demeanor wavered, hinting at an underlying unease that unsettled me. Our quest for ice took us to the motel office, where a tired receptionist offered apologies and excuses about the broken ice machine, promising repairs that seemed distant and unhelpful in the moment. "Any other options?" My grandfather pressed, a subtle urgency creeping into his voice. "Up the road, but it's late. Everything's closed by now," she replied, her sympathy tinged with a hint of indifference. Resigned but determined, my grandfather's decision was swift. "Let's go," he urged, his movements purposeful as he led us back across the deserted parking lot. Handing back the plastic ice bucket, I followed him to our car, where impatience mingled with curiosity. "Why the rush?" I ventured, sensing a tension I'd never seen in him before. His reply was curt, but laden with significance. "We need to keep moving. It's important." That night, we found ourselves on the road again, the forest enveloping us in its eerie embrace as we sought refuge at a desolate roadside rest stop. Grandpa's explanation was sparse, his insistence on avoiding further motels palpable. "We'll sleep here. Backseat's all yours. I've got a blanket in the trunk." Confused and uncomfortable, I settled into the back seat as dawn broke, birdsong piercing the quiet morning air. Grandpa, already awake, greeted me casually as if our roadside slumber was an everyday occurrence. His reluctance to discuss the motel incident only deepened my curiosity. Why did we leave the motel? What was all that about? I pressed, a mix of frustration and intrigue coloring my voice. With a sigh, he offered a vague promise of explanation for another time. A promise he kept years later, long after that summer became a distant memory and our bond had grown stronger. It wasn't until his final days, battling illness and reflecting on his life, that he shared the truth with me through an unexpected letter or revelation that tied our ice-filled rituals to a long-buried encounter from his past. If you've enjoyed these spine-tingling stories that kept you on the edge of your seat, like, share, and subscribe to keep the fear alive and join us on more terrifying adventures.